welcome to the Shandy. I want to start this video with a disclaimer. I'm not going to address anything regarding the efficacy in terms of infection rates and fatality rates, etc. of any of the measures currently in place for the COVID-19 pandemic. This is an absolute minefield right now, and frankly, I think it distracts from the overall point I'm trying to make here. So with that out of the way, let's talk about today's topic, sacrificing the working class. So it seems to me that most people fall into two groups, with a smaller third group kind of lagging behind. The first one is the lock everything down and throw away the key until there's a vaccine group. The second one is the open everything up and throw caution to the wind group. And finally, the smallest group, the let's find some middle ground group. And today, we're not worried about the last two, we're just going to look at the first group. I know several people from this camp personally, but I am showing a few public examples of this kind of thinking to make the case that it does exist beyond my tiny bubble. The interesting thing I have noted is that it appears that those who profess to be for the lockdowns are all in the middle class or higher. Celebrities and personalities on Twitter and other social media easily fall into this category, but even among those personal relations I mentioned earlier, there are no working class people with this viewpoint. Now, this is all anecdotal and I admit that, so take all of this section with a grain of salt. Regardless though, I think it will help put things in perspective as we move through my argument. So this first group here sees lockdowns as the only true way to combat the virus, at least until there's a vaccine. There is some logic to this argument. The virus can't spread if there's no contact between people and places that other people have been. So the argument goes, just stay inside and this will all be over soon. Except there is a problem. A large portion of these people are not the doomsday prepper type. They don't have entire bunkers full of rice and beans to feed themselves while the lockdown continues. These are your DoorDash lockdowners. To them, there is no problem. They just stay at home, avoid other people, and choose contactless delivery on their food delivery app. They likely have a job that also allows them to work from home, and thus they don't have to worry about whether or not they can pay their rent or their mortgage. Those in this camp usually can be fairly self-contained and can afford to be in a lockdown. In their mind, the solution is simple then. Everyone should just stay home. As I'm sure some of you have already probably picked up, it's a bit obvious when you dig into this a little bit that that's an impossible standard. And let me give you an example. So let's say our lockdown friend here orders DoorDash in a lockdown. What happens? Well, someone has to leave their house to take the food from the restaurant and drop it off at the customer's door. But it's not just that. At least one person, if not more, has to be working at the restaurant to make the food in the first place. Then you need truck drivers to deliver more food to the restaurant to make sure the restaurant has foods to make the meals out of. Then you need people to work at the distribution centers to load the food onto the truck to go to the restaurant. Then you need people at the processing plant to take the raw food products and process them into packages that are usable by the restaurants. Before then, you need workers on farms to continue to harvest the crops and slaughter the animals that make up those food products. Not to mention all of the additional truck drivers to transport these things to where they need to go. There are dozens, if not hundreds of people that need to work in order for you to get your Impossible Veggie Burger delivered by DoorDash. Virtually all of these people are working class and don't have the luxury of working from home. And this is just one scenario, mind you. One person, not to mention the hundreds, the thousands, the tens of thousands, if not more, people using DoorDash. And not just delivery services either. You also have to take into account grocery stores, for example. Those have similar supply chains to restaurants, and more people likely working inside them in order to maintain the grocery store so that you can shop there for your food if you choose to work at home. Going back to our delivery example, an interesting point to keep in mind is this. The only person, if any, that is visible to our lockdown enthusiast is the delivery driver, and even then, there are contactless drop-offs now that require zero human face-to-face contact. Out of sight, out of mind. Now, one of the counterpoints to this might be, well, that's why we need to celebrate essential workers like nurses, truck drivers, etc. But this just rings hollow for me. How is that any different from people saying thoughts and prayers? Those people get mocked constantly, usually for what is perceived to be the hollow nature of such a gesture, that it doesn't actually do anything. Remember, this is a deadly pandemic. Those that can stay inside all day, work from home, and just order DoorDash have the luxury of being safer from the pandemic. Those that do not have that luxury now must risk their lives in order to support the people that do. These are the essential workers. Effectively, this means that those who support lockdowns are totally okay with essential workers dying in order for them to receive their online ordered food while they themselves are out of harm's way. And before you say that doesn't follow or is hyperbolic, think about it, because if the risk to those workers was taken as seriously as those that can work from home, then the essential workers wouldn't be outside. The risk to essential workers is deemed to be acceptable. Those that push lockdowns and have the luxury of working from home and simply ordering food online are okay with sacrificing the working class to ensure their own safety and comfort. Now, is this to say that lockdowns won't be helpful in containing the virus? Again, let me be clear. I'm not making that point. It very well could. I'm not here to decide whether or not the lockdown is efficient or does its job or not. All I'm saying is that with a lockdown, you must take into account that the working class has to still operate almost as normal. Otherwise, the rest of those on lockdown can't sustain themselves. So a quick side note here before I give my conclusion. One could make an argument that the true essential workers in this scenario are the ones that stay at home, because these are the ones that are deemed worthy enough to not be put at that risk. That's a bit too tinfoil hat for me, but I think that's an interesting thought nonetheless. But back to the main idea. I argue that lockdowns only really protect those that have the luxury to work from home or are unemployed while sacrificing those that do not. Given this, I think it's a bit crazy to see all of this condescension to the working class about being stupid and not staying inside. Most of them have no choice. They have to because you ordered an Impossible Veggie Burger on DoorDash and someone has to grow, harvest, transport, process, transport again, prepare, and deliver it for you. This is exacerbated by the idea that because we designate them essential workers and put up a thank you sign, that it makes it all better. It doesn't. People still have to risk the pandemic to help those in their ivory towers stay comfortable. So I probably sound like a bit of a Marxist given how I've made this argument, and those of you that watched my last video might be getting suspicious. I'm not a Marxist, but I do come from a working class background, and now living in a mostly middle class world, I notice many of those differences. I'm not asking for anything like wealth distribution or seizing the means of production. I'm simply asking that those that purport to give a damn about the working class actually think about how their proposals affect the working class, lest their actual lack of empathy show through. Finally, I have heard a bit of feedback about how I use mostly left-wing arguments on this channel. That is likely going to be the focus for now, despite me being an American conservative, because I think that one must understand how their opponent thinks in order to discuss anything with them productively. A less generous analogy might be know your enemy. Anyway, thank you for your time watching, and take care.